Hey guys, Mace40 here. Well, I haven't done a video in a while, so I decided to do something a little different. Normally I just talk about this and that and just different things, but now I decided that I'm going to do a story. I like reading fantasy novels, especially by R.L. Salvador and authors like that. I like just any type of fantasy. And I had came up with a book. Now, I'm the type of person that can't really put words on paper. I like doing them in one take and telling a short story. It's not exactly a short story. It's going to be a continuing story, and this is going to be chapter 1. Now, I call this Orphans of War. And some of the main characters is Alex. And to just give a summary, there's Alex, and then there's Tessa, and as we go along through the chapters, other characters will be added. Now, Alex is having his birthday, which I'm about to tell you about. Now, he lives in a small town called Hollister, and let's just begin our story there. Well, the wind's blowing out of the north, and on a chilly fall morning, it just became fall in this small town, and the sun's coming out of the west, and the sun pours into a window with tattered curtains, and the beams of light shine in, and they shine in Alex's face, and Alex, he groans and he rolls over. And then he realizes what day it was. Today was his birthday. So up he popped right out of bed. And he was really excited. Because he knew today that it was, not only today was his birthday, he was going to try out for a group in the village that protects the village. It was called the Red Claw. And he remembered his father used to be part of the Red Claw. So he was real excited. Now, Alex's father had left on a mission with the Red Claws in a small group and never returned. And this has been 5 years ago. And so Alex misses his father tremendously, and so does his mother. Well, it wasn't soon. He's sitting on the bed, he's putting on his boots, and his mom had made him a new traveling coat. So he was sporting his new traveling coat, and he's like, he just can't wait. And so he enters the room, and his mom's sitting there cooking, and he groans a little bit, and he goes, "Cabbage again?" And she said, "Well, I'm afraid that's all there is. Boiled cabbage." And he sat down at the table, and he said, "Mom, how about I go hunting and bring us some meat on the table?" She said, "I don't want you in those woods." And he signed and said, "But Mom, that's what I'm going to have to do for the Red Claw, to get in." He said, "I've got to go hunting, and I got to bring back whatever they tell me to go hunt." And she said, do you really want to do this?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And so he eats some cabbage, and he thinks for a minute, and he said, "Mom, what do you think ever happened to Dad?" And she said, "I don't know." She signed, and she said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry that he hasn't been here and I miss him dearly. But nobody really knows what happened to him." And then Alex said, "You think he was captured by orcs?" He said, "There's a lot of orcs in these parts." And she goes, "Alex, I don't even want to think about that." Well, anyway, he's determined to be a hunter, an adventurer like his father was. And she knew this, and she didn't want him following in his footsteps. But what could she do, Well, anyway, she said, I got your old bow out of the closet. I noticed you haven't touched it since your father disappeared, so you may want to retether it. And he said, I already have. He done been up in the middle of the night and tethered his bow and was getting it ready for the hunt. So she said, you better be getting on your way. It's already a little late. And he goes, oh, okay. And so he jumps up and he rushes out the door. On the way out, he grabs his bow and his quiver. However, he only had about 2 arrows in his quiver and knew that he's going to need some for the hunt. So he went to the local blacksmith. And he knew the blacksmith's daughter, which her name is Tessa. Now, Tessa, her background, her mother was half orc, which makes her third orc. And she's a big, scrapping, red-headed girl. She's taller than Alex, about a head taller. Alex has a bit of a crush on her, but he don't know how to go about it because every time he does, she tends to get mad, and you can tell the orc in her when her eyes flash red, and it always takes Alex back a little bit, so he keeps from ridiculing her too much because he liable to get a black eye or worse, because this girl will just pop you, just give you one. So he looks out. Well, anyway, he goes to the blacksmith, and he hears a yell, hey, Alex, and Tessa runs up to him, and she goes, I see you're ready for the hunt. He says, not quite, holding up his quiver. She goes, you need arrows, don't you? And he said, yeah. And you think your dad can spare a few? And she said, of course. So she went in and started poking around in his little blacksmith and everything. All of a sudden you hear a booming voice. He said, girl, what are you doing in there? Disorganizing everything I just got back in order. And she said, but Alex needs some arrows. And he said, I don't care if he needs a swift kick in the butt. You don't go rambling around in a man's black shop. And she said, but Daddy. And he said, but Daddy, whatever. Well, anyway, he said, good morning, Mr. Thorne. And he said, Alex. He said, I tell you, you're looking like your father. More and more like your father every day. And he said, really? He said, yeah, I ventured with your father, along with old Dolan. And Tessa said, oh, speaking of Dolan, here he comes. And Dolan is this old little dwarf that lives in the woods in a little cave area. And he's, Tessa's father said, well, that's where me, your father, and old Dolan, he said, that's where we used to hold up our adventuring camp. That was our stronghold. And she goes, here we go with the stronghold. He said, yeah, that good old stronghold. Said that's where we did our adventures, and that's where we ended up. And it had several chambers because Dolan and his people would work on them. He said, the dwarven people. And he said, and she just hearing him just rambling on. Well, Dolan comes up behind Tessa. Tessa had turned her back, and he come up on her, smacked her right on the rear end. Oh, she flared up. She said, that old dwarf smacks me on the butt every time, and he says the same old thing. And Dolan says, if you had a beard, lassie, you'd be the perfect woman. And it just aggravated her to death, Well, anyway, they get Alex some arrows, and Alex inspects them, and he said, this is some of your best work. And he said, thank you, boy. So he puts the arrows in his quiver, and he says, well, Tessa, I better get moving. She said, yeah, you better. And she said, you tell me what happened if you make it in the Red Claw. He said, okay. So he took off, and he got halfway down the street when old Dolan said, you boy, come here. Alex stopped and turned around and said, yeah, he said, it's your birthday today, isn't it? See, yes it is. He said, I have something for you. Reaching behind his back and pulling, he pulled out a hilt with a strap on it, and it was a sword. And Alex's eyes lit up as he's presented this sword with the scabbard. It had a scabbard and it had a strap on it. And he said, this ye son used to belong to your father. And Alex goes, my father, really? He said, yes, he entrusted it to me to give to you someday on your 15th birthday. And he goes, wow. And he hands him the sword, and it's ornamented. It's got little, it had little carvings on it and everything. And it had a 4-leaf clover on the end of it. Which is real wild. He said, yeah, he said, your sword will bring you good luck. And Alex, he's really good luck. He said, yeah, it's called a luck blade. He goes, He pulls it out of the hilt and inspects it, and it's real silvery, he said, made out of silver. And he said, oh. And so he pulls out the sword and he holds it out and he balances it, and makes sure it's thin. And he swings it around. He said, yeah, well, thank you, Dolan. And said, you're welcome. And so he sticks it back in the hilt and throws it on his shoulder and pulls on it. It's a nice snug fit. And he said, well, thank you very much. I'm going to put this to good use. And he said, that's the only way you can put a sword is good use. So Alex pivoted on his feet and took off toward the Red Claw. And so he started up to the main gate there where the guard station is, and he seen an old guy standing there, standing tall, a guard. And Alex speaks up and says, I'm here to take my initiation into the Red Claw. He said, so I can see, boy, looks like you're ready to go. Well, guys, we're going to leave it at that. I don't want to make this video too long. This is going to be the end of chapter 1. Next chapter is Into the Red Claw. So I hope y'all enjoyed this chapter, and we'll pick up later. See you guys later, and the adventure continues.